welcome back to Cindy's Library. This is Cindy. I apologize for missing last week. Saturday was busier than I thought it would be, so I ended up missing last week, but I'm here this week, so I guess we'll do 2 weeks today, and we will talk about how Victober ended for me. So let us get started. So I finished The Young Stepmother, or a Chronicle of Mistakes. Oh, this has a very different tone than Dickens or from Dracula. It is just cozy is a good word for it. It's by Charlotte Mary Yonge. She's well known for that type of story in the Victorian era, or at least she was. So she writes historical and some other things too. So this is the story of Albinia. She ends up marrying a gentleman whose wife had previously passed away, so he is a widower with 3 living children, a son and 2 daughters. But nothing daunted, Albinia agrees to the marriage and looks forward to helping this family. And to be fair, she really does help them. The children each had many issues. The house was gloomy metaphorically, and can't really blame them. The wife had died, numerous children, including the remaining son's twin, had died. And so Albinia, she really does bring sunshine into their lives. She also makes a number of mistakes through lack of experience or not having all of the information, but you never doubt that her heart is really in the right place. I would say this probably takes 10 years to go from beginning to end or thereabouts. Maybe a bit longer, something like that though. And so we get to see Albinia's first steps, entering into this family and trying to make her own place in there. Oh, to the end, when many things have changed. Many, though not all, for the better. Like I said, some mistakes were made along the way. But a wonderful, wonderful story. I need to reread this, and I need to do it, well, not literally in one sitting. It was probably 6 months between this time I stopped and the time I picked it up again for Victober, which is not the way to do this. Charlotte Mary Yonge, you sometimes want to read slower, but you don't want to stop, so that was a mistake. So I'll have to read this one. And when I do, I'm very much looking forward to it. Oh, Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. You'll notice here, well, maybe you can see it easier here. I'm not quite done. That is because this last section, as it says, if I can get to it, are letters. And so that seems like the perfect thing to enjoy for Nonfiction November, even though there's no official Nonfiction November. But as for the poetry, a lot of it really is love poetry. And I sense I am missing something. Though it's not all love poetry, and I would say Elizabeth Barrett Browning did a bit less. In fact, Oh, let me see. Um, she did. They have a section from Aurora Lee in here, which is a narrative poem. And the section they had in here makes me want to go and read that one. Maybe next Victober. It might be time. And then sonnets for the Portuguese. Now, even if a lot of this is love poetry, it doesn't mean it's bad love poetry. I mean, listen to this. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight for ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right, love thee purely as they turn from praise, love thee with the passion put to use, my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose, with my lost saints I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and if God choose I shall but love thee the better after death. This is where that first line, which is so famous, actually comes from. I did not know that. So, enjoyable. Maybe not my favorite poets overall, but it's early days with them. Okay. Reread The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde again. And I forget if I talked about this already, but oh, it is such a funny, non-spooky short story. We have this old house in England, Canterville Mansion or some such thing, that has been haunted for years by this ghost. Scared most everyone away. I think the present owner doesn't even live there, doesn't want to live there. And so he rents it out to this American diplomatic family, who, of course, they're modern and scientific and don't believe in ghosts. And shenanigans go on from there, and shenanigans is definitely the right word. And it has a very sweet ending. Oh, John Halifax, Gentleman by Dina Maria Mulock. What to say about this? It is sentimental with a capital S, although I don't know if it was exaggerated because I listened to most of this or not. And the narrator definitely gave vent to full emotion in certain parts. But really, well, it's basically what it says. This is the tale of John Halifax, Gentleman. I forget exactly how old he is when our narrator Phineas first meets John Halifax. So Phineas, he is a boy, very lonely. We aren't given too many details, but he is an invalid, often is sick, has to be careful going out, doesn't have much energy if he does go out, doesn't really have any friends. Might be 13, 14, 15, about the age these boys are. And one day he meets John Halifax, maybe a couple years younger, and is immediately drawn to him. The description he uses is David for Jonathan, like from the Bible. King's son Jonathan met David, and David was immediately drawn to him. And they become the best of friends, and we go through the highs and through the lows. Phineas is a bit protected. His father is a tradesman, primarily a tanner, although he also has a mill. But poor John Halifax, he has almost no idea who he is. He is an orphan. I think he barely has a memory or two of vague impressions of his mother, and he has a New Testament with their names, and next to his father's name says gentleman. So he is determined to be a gentleman, even though he is penniless and has nowhere to go. Fortunately, Phineas's father takes him on as an apprentice, but this is uh, during the late 1700s, early 1800s, when if you thought class conditions were bad during the Victorian era, they apparently were even worse earlier. And so John Halifax has to struggle with that, and eventually he does make it, and it's basically his life. The point when Phineas first meets him to his death at the end as an old man, and everything in between. And as sentimental as this was, I kept being drawn back to it once I got into it and couldn't stop listening because I had to hear all about John Halifax and what was happening to him and what he was going to do. So there is that. And I read Dracula by Bram Stoker. And yes, it is about the titular vampire, the people he affects. But it's not what you think. And there's a lot of contrast between the modern world and the old world, and science and reason versus superstition and religion. And it's interestingly structured because this is basically all journal entries, newspaper articles, correspondence, those type of things. So as far as format goes, very, very interesting. Let's see. And I finished Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is the story of Molly Gibson. And it starts with her as a girl. I think she's about 12 when we first meet her. Then we skip ahead in a few chapters to when she is a full young lady and gentlemen are starting to take notice of her. And her father's starting to worry about this. And he is a widower, has been for many years. But for Molly's sake, he wonders if he shouldn't get married, and so he does. And so we get how that affects the family, bringing in a stepmother and also a stepsister, and village life and how they react to all of this, and various love lives. And I listened to this the first time, and I am an audio person, very much so. And I liked it the first time, but this time reading it in this copy, I loved it. And it was wonderful. And because I needed a bit of a break after all of that Victorian reading, I read Shady Hollow, a murder mystery. This is a little community of anthropomorphic animals that basically act like humans, mostly. I mean, birds can fly, mice and small animals like that are still nervous about the owl or the bear, even though they promised they're vegetarians. But things really get started when, let's see, that doesn't say his name. But there is a murder discovered. He is a toad, rather cranky toad, who not many people like very much, is found in the pond. And while he's in the pond and there's a knife in his back, it's also found that he is poisoned. And so reporter Vera the Vixen is determined to get the scoop. And so she starts investigating, even though the police are investigating as well. And things go on from there. Very, very fun. Had a lot of fun with that one. Quick read. So let us see here. Back to the final count for Victober. So I primarily did wives and daughters for the color wheel because I spun and got pink. And other than Daniel Deronda, this is the only pink Victorian book I could find. But I am not displeased about that at all. I was planning on reading Dracula. I was not counting on it counting towards anything, but it indeed does count towards things. Specifically, a Victorian fantasy book. Technically, this may not be exactly fantasy, but Dracula is definitely fantastical, supernatural, and so I am counting it for that. John Halifax, Gentleman. Let's see. Oh, this one I was going to read instead of the group read, and this is late Georgian era Regency, basically. And so this is definitely a different era. And I read the Brownings poetry for something that is not a novel. Young Stepmother definitely has some, it feels very domestic like Jane Austen, and also has plenty of village life around it as well, like Jane Austen can. And so I'm counting it for that. And friendship. Yeah, Albinia, she does make friends with all of her stepchildren, and there's other friends that enter the family's life as well. And this is also an underrated woman author. Charlotte Mary Yonge is. So this counts for that. Then, as I said, back when I was talking about our mutual friend, uh, many changes in class status. People are worried about who certain people marry because they're not of the same class. Bella early would like to rise up in class. Also, education. Uh, Lizzie's father's views on education are interesting. Lizzie insisting on Charlie getting an education and what that looks like has interesting the tragic results. And Lizzie's own decisions about her own education. Those are definitely a part of this as well. Let's see. Oh, and Empire spotting in this. The whole fortune that is at much of the center of this story, I forget whether it was made in Africa or not. Certainly the grandson or nephew, or is it son, went out to Africa, I think, while he was under his father's displeasure. And we definitely see plenty of signs of empire in the upper crust. Some of the food that is mentioned is definitely not grown in England or even Europe. Talk about silks, not from Europe. Talk about other such decorations that are not from Europe. Talks about, I'm not sure whether they were side figurines or on the dining table or what, but they talk about elephants and camels, another sign of empire. So, yeah, plenty of signs of empire in our mutual friend if you want to go empire spotting. So, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Victorian books. Plus poetry for Victober. I'm going to call that a success. Now, it is true, the one thing I did not get finished is Windsor Castle by W. Harrison Ainsworth. I was doing pretty good. I was nearly halfway through, started part 3, and he just started giving us a very detailed description of the history of Windsor Castle. But this past week I powered through it, so I'm now definitely over the halfway mark, even if barely, through part 3, and I'm hopeful that the rest will not go back to history, and if that is the case, we can finish this by the end of the year, if not in November. So, I think that is everything. I think that is enough to be getting on with. So, what am I going to do for this next week? Well, we only have 2 months left. It is the first day of November. So, I need to work on Paraiso. Have a couple of group reads for book groups. And let's see, what else? My mind is drawing a blank. But what I do know is even if Nonfiction November is no more officially, I want to read lots of nonfiction in November. So I have a book about John Quincy Adams I have started that I want to get through, and a number of things, and I am hopeful. I also, it might be nice to read a bit more in the mystery category. This seems like a good time of year to do that, so I might do that. But we'll keep it fairly open at this point. Oh, and I probably will read those letters in the Browning collection I have. So, do you have any plans for reading this November? I'd love to hear all about them. Don't think there are that many challenges, but that's all the better because there's plenty I want to be working on without challenges at the moment. So thank you so much for stopping by. I truly do appreciate it. So until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy, and as always, happy reading.